Thank you very much. All right. Can everybody hear me? Is this like good? Thumbs up. All right, I know you're all like waiting for the food and drinks at this point, so I'll get straight to it. We're gonna start with a topic kind of ripped from the headlines here, and that is these really weird YouTube videos that have started popping up everywhere. I'm pretty sure a decent number of you have seen these before and know about them, but for those of you that don't know, these are these YouTube kids videos that have been just like infiltrating everybody's feed, and they've been amassing these insane view and watch time values, and they're partially algorithmically generated in terms of the content itself and the title and a lot of things. And after a little while, people started to realize that these actually have really inappropriate things in them. There's subject material that's like abusive to kids, and it's not good at all. So there were some articles about it, and there was a lot of backlash, and they ended up, YouTube is now working to try to mitigate the effects of this and like pull them down. And so why did I start with this? It's because I feel like this is a really good example of something that goes wrong as content becomes increasingly algorithmic. And this is just a sort of the first example of this that gained widespread attention. And so the general topic here is that the content process is becoming more algorithmic. What do I mean when I say the content process? I mean everything from the inception of an idea all the way to the point where someone consumes that piece of content. This is just a snapshot of my personal Spotify account. I listen to these artists, and now this is how I discover most of my music. Their radio feature, it beats the regular radio. It's just an algorithm that keeps recommending better songs to me, and this is how I discover my music. So it's not just the creation, it's also the discovery. It's just different parts within this process that become increasingly algorithmic. And here's the thing that happens. While that process continues, the role of human moderation within it decreases. We're getting replaced by software. And that means that the remaining parts that humans do have control over, those become more important. And nothing is as important, in my opinion, in this process as the core metric that we use to assess content, which tends to be also the metric that we optimize our algorithms to. So if we think that, say, views are the best way to measure how good a video is, that is what we train our algorithms to optimize to. We train them to show content with the most views and to surface that. And there's a concept that's relevant to all of this. It's actually from the field of econometrics, Michael's field, who was talking about before this, and it's called Goodhart's law. It says, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And the sort of classic textbook example of this that's always brought up with this topic is it's based on nail factories back in the Soviet Union. They knew that when they would provide these factories with quotas of how many nails they have to produce, and they noticed that whenever they would give them a number and they had to hit that number, over time the quality of the nails that they would produce would come down. They would make all these like half nails and all these like really bad quality ones just to hit the number. And so they're like, all right, we're going to change, and now you have to produce a certain weight of nails, like this many tons of nails, and then you'll hit your quota. But then what started happening is they were making fewer nails, but ones that were way too big and way too heavy. So again, it's like the problem just showed itself one more time. And this is something that we've seen in all sorts of things, and we see it in content as well. I'm sure you've seen stuff like this. This is a company, Outbrain, that provides a service. When you're like reading an article, at the bottom of it, it has a bunch of articles that it recommends to you. It's like, go check these out. These services, not just Outbrain, but Taboola and a bunch of other ones, they use typically click-through rate as the thing that they optimize to, so they surface the things that have the highest click-through rate. And clicks were basically a measure of people being interested in a topic, of an article being good. But once the algorithms started optimizing to that and surfacing things that have the highest click-through rate, it gradually started to change, and it became just about how you can get the click in whatever way possible, which is the whole clickbait issue that we talk about a lot. And so, over time, click-through rate, which was the metric, became the goal, and then it stopped being a good metric. So what does all of this have to do with BuzzFeed? Well, we make a shit ton of content. That's what it has to do with BuzzFeed. And we make them on all sorts of different platforms and all these different types. So we have different content types on Facebook, on Instagram, and they go everywhere. So this is a problem that we have to deal with all the time. We're constantly trying to find ways of measuring performance of a specific content and platform combination. And so these are just like a daily problem that we constantly have to deal with. Now, before I get into details with BuzzFeed, I'm going to share a little quick thing here with you. This is a snapshot of this email that goes out every day at BuzzFeed to everybody involved with the video portion of the department. And it's just, you might not be able to see the details, just a table that shows like our top performing videos on YouTube and Facebook. Because we're BuzzFeed, we like to give really like fun, zany names to all of our services. So this is called the Daily Video Report. That's what we call this. But I've noticed something very interesting about this. All the producers, all the people that create our content, their goal, their objective is to get to the top of this email. Because this is what the executives look at, this is what the other producers look at. Like, they just want to get to the top. They want their content to be at the top of this so they can tell the executives, I'm good. They want to tell everybody else, I'm good. So they're all collectively trying to get their content to the top. They're trying to get something that gets the most views for YouTube or the most shares for Facebook. And it's really interesting that the way that this collective of creators that is just kind of like iteratively creating content behaves, it's very similar to a machine learning algorithm that's just provided a certain outcome, a certain metric, and is told to just optimize to that. It's mindless in a way because none of them individually feel responsibility over the overall content mix. Each of them is just trying to get one piece to the top. So if you just kind of give them a metric and let it go, it might not go in the direction that you want, even if you're trying to get the most views and the most shares. And so you can kind of model like a machine learning algorithm and its problems the same way as a collective of creators and the problems that they have. A little fun side anecdote about this is that this goes out to a lot of people and it goes from my email address. And I've noticed that I meet new people at the company and this is how they know me, but a lot of them think that, this is just a script that runs on a cron every day, but they think I wake up every morning and I compile this list and I email it out to everybody. And sometimes I don't bother correcting them because they give me a lot of credit. They're just like, wow, you wake up every morning and you send us out so diligent. I'm like, I know, all the time. Always on 9 a.m., exactly. What a coincidence, even on the weekends. So getting into, let's give some examples specifically from BuzzFeed. Let's talk about our Snapchat content. Shout out to Zara, by the way, great talk, really enjoyed it. At BuzzFeed, we typically have every data scientist has sort of like a specialty platform. And we are sort of embedded in teams and we work with people that deal with that type of content. So my colleague Jeff, who's sitting over there, is sort of our Snapchat specialist. And I interviewed him before this talk to ask him a little bit about how content metrics work with the Snapchat team. So if you use the app and you look at the Discover section, which is when you swipe all the way to the right, that's where the brands have their content there. They have these things that are called editions. It's basically like, it's a set of snaps or set of pieces of content in a row that people will go through. And BuzzFeed has one right now, and there's also one for Tasty and another one for Nifty which are our food and our DIY brands. And so it's a important thing for us to be able to measure the performance of our editions. And in terms of metrics that are used to do that, we started out with just what we called uniques, which is number of people that tapped and went inside an edition. So unique viewers, how many people did this reach? And that's good, but that has a problem. It's easy to optimize to getting high uniques by just putting one really provocative tile at the beginning that makes somebody tap into it, and then they could drop off immediately after that. But that artificially inflates your number. So it's that problem of that being a measure, but then once it becomes a target, it's not good anymore because people just try to game it. So when you have that, what do? You can complement it by adding a second metric that addresses its weaknesses. So that's why we added completion rate. Completion rate is for engagement. We started looking at how many people tapped all the way through to the end of an edition. But that has its own flaws because that encourages snaps within an edition that aren't necessarily engaging because someone just taps all the way through and tries to get to the end. So then trying to optimize to that has its own problem as well. And that's why we came up with fourth snap completion, which was just something that a metric that we sort of invented ourselves, which was how many people get to the fourth snap of an edition. And the idea was that we typically start a whole edition with a three-part story, so like 3 snaps that are connected to each other. And we wanted to see how often people go in there, go through those 3 and then continue on to the rest of it. And that's not perfect either. Each of them have their own flaws. Each of them addresses the weaknesses of the previous one. Then there's snap level stuff. This is a very typical snap that we get at BuzzFeed editions. there's emails that go out, just like the ones that I showed you, that rank producers based on the performance of their snaps. So again, all the creators on that team, they're trying to get to the top of that email. So we started out by just using shares as a measure of success for snaps. What did that do? It really encouraged this type of snap, which is just like a really simple image and a call to action that says share this to your friend. And so people were making more and more and more of that because they were trying to get to the top of the email. But we don't want the addition to be just that. We don't want it to just be 10 different pictures of hot dogs and hamburgers and people trying to convince each other to send them to like their friends. So we switched to watch time as a metric for a while, which was something that encouraged the people to actually go and find engaging, entertaining BuzzFeed content from our other platforms and put those in as snaps, like these videos. This one is also about hot dogs. I guess it's a very hot topic. And so this sort of like high retention, exposing our diverse portfolio of content is something that this encouraged. And for Nifty and Tasty, which are the other two brands I told you about, we also look at screenshots because they have utility, right? So a lot of times on the screen you have like the recipe, like the ingredients in a recipe, or you have the steps to doing something. So we have specific metrics for those specific additions. Now another platform that I want to talk about is YouTube. That's my specialty platform. YouTube has sort of, since the get-go, has used views as its most prominent metric. By the way, do you remember when Evolution of Dance was like the highest viewed YouTube video? And now it has like 300 million, and I think like a random Justin Bieber video gets 2 billion now, which is kind of incredible. It's used views traditionally since the get-go, but behind the scenes, they actually switched to watch time as a more core metric a few years ago, and that was, I just threw this in there because I like this slide a lot. I had it from before. I kind of added this whole section to the talk just so I could use the slide. But they started switching watch time more in the background. And watch time is a really interesting metric because it's basically like how much something has been viewed in minutes. It's an example of a compound metric. So it's made up of a relationship between a few smaller ones. So in this case, it's views times video length times average view percentage. Average view percentage means like if a video is 10 minutes long and it's been viewed 5 minutes on average, that's 50% average view percentage. So what's really good about this? Well, if you try to game one portion of this metric, it harms the other two, and so it mitigates the effects of gaming that one part. So if you put in a misleading title or a misleading thumbnail, and you increase views that way, your average view percentage is going to take a hit. So now that minimizes some of the effect of what you tried to do. If you say try to get a really high average view percentage by making the video short, then your video length is low. So again, it gets punished. And so this is a good way to try to mitigate this type of effect by using a compound metric where they're sort of at odds with each other. And that forces people, like, if you're going to make a content that does well by the watch time metric, you have to have it be something that people are interested in, that's a decent length, and that it can retain people. It has to be, in short, good content. But that can go bad too, right? Like this was something that was getting great watch time. That's why it was getting surfaced on the algorithm. And that's the point the whole time. Like all of them have their flaws. None of them are flawless. So let's sort of summarize the points that I went through because I touched on a bunch of different things. And it all comes down to like a good Hart's law and how we try to minimize the effects of it. The general point is that as the content process becomes more algorithmic, the measures of content performance, which are a part that humans still pick and still decide on, are increasing in importance. They're becoming more and more important just as time goes by. So there are some ways of addressing that. One is that you can periodically switch your core metrics so that you get a good, diverse portfolio of content. That's what we did with our snaps, where we had like shares and then watch time and then other stuff. You can complement your existing metrics with other ones that address their weaknesses. So that's what we did with the additions, which was we had uniques, and then we added completion rate, and then fourth snap completion. And you can also use compound metrics. That's a YouTube example that I gave. In general, as kind of a rule of thumb, I would say compound metrics and switching your metric are good for algorithms. And then sort of complementing existing metrics is something that's good for when you have that whole collection of producers that I mentioned. But at the end of it all, there's one thing that we need to remember, and that is that there are no perfect metrics. The automation process for content is not going to slow down. It's not going to stop. It's just going to increase. It's just going to get faster and faster, and more parts of this process, whether it's discovery or creation or surfacing, whatever, they're going to become algorithmic. And there's something that we need to remember when we're dealing with this stuff. I think we have, as people who deal with software, we have this image of algorithms as these flawless things. It always does the same thing and it always does it correctly. But the sort of line that I want to be the takeaway from this is that an algorithm may be flawless in its execution of the directives that are provided to it, but the directives that are provided to it are not flawless. And that means that the result of the algorithm is not going to be flawless either. As data scientists, we have an ethical and moral responsibility to be aware of the downsides of this. I think we are sort of separated from the content creation process, so sometimes we don't feel that burden because we're like, I'm not making the thing. But we are. By being the people that surface them, by helping with these algorithms, we are essentially helping them get made. When we make an algorithm that rewards a certain type of content, that means that people are going to go and make that type of content. I might not make that personally, but I'm making a flood of people do that. And so we have this responsibility, and we have to remember that this is essentially a problem that's only going to get worse, and we have to be aware of the downsides. And if we don't, then we'll continue to run into problems like the ones with YouTube and other ones that are inevitably going to surface themselves in the years to come. So I'm happy to talk more about this stuff after this, but this is all I had for you for now. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Thanks for the nice presentation. There's one, at some point when you said that when you optimize one matrix, that matrix become kind of like have less quality in terms of things to optimize, right? I wonder does this happen when you optimize only one matrix at a time, or is it happen at the when you create a content that try to optimize some matrix, but did the two different?
Right. So typically, you can't quite give, especially to an algorithm, you can't really give two separate things and say optimize for both of them, because by definition, if it's optimized for one, it's not optimized for the other one, unless they're 100% correlated, in which case one of them is useless. But the way you do something like that is that whole compound metric that I said, right? You take the three metrics and you combine them into one, and then you provide that one to the algorithm. And it does mitigate the effect a little bit. Like you said, it's like if you provided multiple things all as one metric, then it mitigates it a little bit.
Another question would be that why can't we create some contents that optimize one metric and some content optimize another to ensure variety?
We do. I mean, that's why I said when I said we have like multiple different metrics that we provide for them and we swap them out, that's what we do to amass a diverse portfolio of content. One of the problems is that in a lot of different content and platform metrics, people just pick one as like the best metric and they just stick with that. So in Facebook it'll just be like shares, or in Twitter maybe it'll be retweets, and that's when these problems arise. But you can take multiple different metrics and provide them to different people. That's something that I advocate for at BuzzFeed. Okay.
Sorry, one last question, if I may. Yes. When we have a multitude of metrics that we want to optimize, right? Does this mean that if we cannot come up with new metrics, we will not get the new original contents over time?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
So if we choose a matrix to optimize, right, and over time there will be a constant, constant amount of matrix that we want to choose, right? Does this mean if we reach that point, we will not get any original content created?
Like some theoretical point at the end where all of the content has just been already made? I mean, I suppose in an infinite timeline that's possible, yeah. I mean, but I don't think that's, I mean, the the platforms and the types of content change so much that I don't think we're gonna reach that point anytime soon, or if ever at all. So as new platforms pop up, so do new metrics, and as new metrics pop up, so do new types of content. So if it stayed this way forever, maybe, but it's not going to.
This is more on the discovery side, and it's a very subjective question, which is, do you think algorithmically driven content discovery has made it easier or harder to discover better content?
I would say easier. Absolutely, I would say easier, and I think that I think algorithmic discovery is gonna get rid of a lot of features that we have currently in a lot of like our social media platforms over time. Like I have this theory that like subscribing to things on YouTube is going to become obsolete over time, because why should, like, my ability to judge what future content I like is going to stay constant. The human ability to do that is going to stay constant, but the algorithm is only going to get better. So at some point, inevitably, the algorithm is going to overtake the human ability to do that. So I do think it's better. I think it's improved it, and it's going to continue to improve it over time, is my view. I know it's subjective, and yeah.
I have an equally subjective question, which is ultimately the echo chamber, if you will, or as we get on and we become not exposed to other things because of our recommendations and the things that we want, and obviously you're optimizing to get that person to engage in what their interests are, and suddenly the myopia that comes as a result of that. I would love to get your take, more of an anthropological point of view, if you will, about what you think the ramifications are of that culturally.
Well, I mean, we're living in the ramifications of it right now, right? We're seeing it, we're living it right now.
You're working in, obviously you're at BuzzFeed, you're in media, you're in data science. Just how would you see, I would love to get your opinion on how you think we would work through that, and what are some good practices to do that?
You know, I think this is my sort of optimistic view of it, which is that I think we are in the part of it right now where we're seeing the bad effects of it. Like I said, we're living with the ramifications of it. And it's going to continue for a while till we realize it, and it affects us in so many ways that we decide that, you know what, maybe I don't always want the thing that's exactly like all the stuff that I've liked before. And I think gradually our algorithms can accommodate that as well. They can give you things that are different every once in a while just to gather that data point, right? And I think some of them already do. Like you can, if I like a certain type of music and it keeps playing that type of music, they can add features in there that occasionally offer me different types just so they can get me outside of it. Same thing for political views. But ultimately, it comes down to what we as humans want, right? They're just making something to increase whatever their core metric is. If adding that occasional random piece or something that disagrees with you will increase our usage of it, will make me want to use that service more, that's what they'll offer. But right now, it doesn't. Everybody wants exactly what they want, and so that's what gets built. Over. I'll be around after this if other people have questions too.